Welcome to another episode of History for Weirdos.
What's going on, weirdos? I'm glad to be back. We're always glad to be back.
Always. I will say, as we begin this episode, little disclaimer, I have a cold. I've had a cold all weekend. So if I sound stuffy, it's because I'm stuffy.
And honestly, this is kind of my bad, guys, because I had a cold beforehand.
Oh, that's right.
I got a cold like literally the day after my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sick all this last week. And then you got sick as soon as I started feeling better.
Yeah, that is true. It is your fault. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
And if you're not married, weirdos, I'm talking more to like my male listeners. Once you get married, assuming if you marry a woman, you're going to get blamed a lot. So you just have to get used to it.
You blamed yourself.
I know. Guys, it was a preemptive blame.
Oh my goodness.
Just lessening it, for myself in the future.
You're so odd.
Unsolicited marriage advice. Let's go.
That's such terrible advice. I'm too tired to fight back, though. Also, if you are watching this episode on our Patreon, where you could see full-length episodes, you will see that I'm wearing some funky spectacles to hide how sad and tired I look. I also look like I'm hungover because we're like sitting in the dark in our apartment.
Just for the ambiance,
with the sunglasses, but I'm not hungover. I'm just sick. And speaking of Patreon, this is a reminder. We recently launched our Patreon on Andrew's birthday.
What?
And it's been really exciting. It's been so fun already to get to interact with folks more on Patreon. We have different tiers that you can look at. All of this information will be in the show notes. And I want to shout out one of our patrons, actually, because they shared a really interesting history fact. So, if you've been a listener for a while, you know that Andrew's specialty is...
You tell me. What is it?
Ancient history, ancient Rome,
Yeah.
More specifically the Roman Republic, the late Republic.
Absolutely.
If I'm getting more specific.
Yeah, you know me too well. That's very spot on.
And what is one of my special interests in history?
So either the Tudors or Victorian England.
Yep. The Tudors is what this lovely patron named Perry Ortega commented on one of our posts. He shared a really interesting fact. He said that he loves Tudor history as well, and that Anne Boleyn is one of his favorite historical figures. She's one of mine also. And he brought up that through her line, Prince William will be is related to her through Diana. So when he ascends to the throne, when his dad passes away, probably kind of soon, not gonna lie, then Anne Boleyn's line will be at the head of the throne again.
For the first time since
Elizabeth.
Yeah, like the early 1600s.
Isn't that wild?
That's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Perry, for sharing that.
Yeah, Perry, that's an amazing fact.
I thought that was so cool. And that's one of the things that I'm loving already about our Patreon. So I've rambled about it enough. If you're interested, check it out in the show notes.
And I think there might be like a couple more slots of the super weirdo and ultimate weirdo like tiers. So if you're one of the next few people to join, you'll get the free gift. I don't think we've hit the 25 mark, so we're almost there. It's like only 2 or 3 more left. So you guys got to do it fast if you want that free gift. It'll be pretty cool.
Get on that, weirdos.
It's gonna be cool.
So Andrew, tell us, what story, figure, time in history are you going to regale us with today?
Okay, so I have a really interesting for you guys this week.
Yeah, tell us.
We have covered ill-fated queens before who have risen against the Roman Empire, and as I said, Boudica and Zenobia. If you guys haven't listened to those episodes, definitely do so after this one. But each time they rose up in revolt against Rome, it didn't work out well for them, like most people, if I'm being honest.
Spoilers.
But this week, we're going to highlight, yet again, another queen who stood against the might of Rome, but actually prevailed. This is very rare. The fact that A, someone prevailed against Rome, but B, it was a woman.
Yeah. This is going to be cool.
This is like a deep cut, y'all. So there are not too many leaders, again, in antiquity who stood against Rome and lived to tell the tale. This is definitely one of those. we're going to cover Queen Amanirenas. She was the queen of Kush, defender of her people against the most powerful empire of the world at the time.
Wow.
And she even infamously slighted Caesar Augustus personally.
Oh, snap.
And if you don't know who Caesar Augustus was, he was the first Roman emperor.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get into that a little bit later in the story. For now, before we dive into her life, let's talk about Kush.
Yeah, give us some
kingdom
context.
of Kush. Not the other thing,
Not the other Kush.
Not the other Kush. Kingdom of Kush.
Fair enough.
Guys. So the kingdom of Kush had been around in some sort of incarnation for thousands of years by this point in our story.
Oh, wow.
So Kush was situated just south of ancient Egypt and would comprise, southern Egypt and northern Sudan in the present day.
Okay.
So with the power base among kind of the Nile.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the Nile, just right before it splits off into its two main tributaries, in the south.
Okay, so you said southern Egypt, northern Sudan.
Correct.
And I just want to shout out Sudan because they're having a civil war right now, and a lot of people aren't talking about it. It's being called the Forgotten War already, and this is their third civil war in, I think, less than 70 years. So I've recently actually just did some more research and educated myself on it, educated myself on ways to help the Sudanese refugees. So just a reminder to the weirdos. I know you all are very informed, involved people, so definitely look into that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's very coincidental because this war is kind of also forgotten in antiquity.
That's so
and
interesting.
only until recently has interest garnered again, because there's just this one random account that talks about it, and that's it. No one else references it.
Oh my gosh.
So it's very interesting from that perspective, but also you're right. It is. Sadly, I don't know a whole lot about it. I know some of the very basics, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is a terrible, terrible thing that's going on. But
yeah. This is why we, also learn history. It helps to inform the present. It gives context.
Exactly. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. You're 100% correct.
Yeah, but sorry, go back to your story.
So this area, Kush, it was also the site of what's called the Kerma culture, which can be dated around 4,500 years ago. So that was the precursor to the Kushites.
Okay.
They, so like Egypt, the civilization had been around for a very long time, but it was definitely distinct from Egypt.
Yeah.
Similar, but distinct. So writings about the area go back all the way to 2300 BC, around that time, from old Egyptian sources, as these two powers would trade back and forth between each other.
Yeah.
Pretty
Makes
standard.
sense.
Yeah, especially pretty standard during the Bronze Age. Although it wouldn't always be as peaceful as that, because around 1500 BC, Pharaoh Thutmose I, he's one of the great Egyptian leaders or pharaohs, he would capture the area.
Oh, wow.
So he would become pharaoh of not only Egypt, but also the Kushites.
Wow.
So the Kushites, ironically, would return the favor about 800 years later, more or less, and the 25th dynasty of Egypt would actually be Kushites or Nubians. The two terms are often used interchangeably.
Yes.
Nubia refers to the geographic area, whereas Kush is usually more of the political entity in the geographic area.
Wow, that's a really good distinction to know.
Yeah.
Very fancy.
Thought of that all by myself, guys. So, while we're on the subject, here's also a fun fact. So here's a history fact for you guys. Did you know that there are more pyramids in Nubia than there are in Egypt?
No.
Now you do.
Oh my gosh. I never hear about Nubian pyramids.
Yeah. Even though it's really interesting. So pre-dynastic Egypt, I think there was more blending of the two kind of areas than we often think of today.
Okay.
And especially than we often think of even in antiquity. But I mean, this would be before the pharaohs, so thousands and thousands of years ago.
That's wild to think about people before the pharaohs.
Yeah, I know there were what we call pharaohs in Upper Egypt, so that's southern Egypt, right? But we know nothing about it because this would be in the 4th millennium BC.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really weird because their culture is completely alien to us. We don't know their writings. We don't know anything about them.
That makes sense. It was so long ago.
Yeah. So, but kind of going back to our narrative, the influence of both Kush and Egypt would wane under newer, even more powerful threats, starting with the Assyrians during the 8th and 7th centuries BC, then the Persians during the 6th century, and even Alexander the Great, a Macedonian Greek, would become pharaoh during the 4th century BC, and Greeks would continue to rule Egypt for, roughly the next 300 or so years.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this to say that the old, once powerful kingdoms have themselves either been conquered or have had to contend with very powerful invaders at their doorsteps.
Yeah.
So during the 1st century BC, the Romans are starting to get much more involved in Egyptian affairs.
They really liked the culture, right? The history.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely one aspect. Another is that, a lot of the Ptolemaic dynasty, either contenders or they'd fight amongst themselves. A lot of the time they would, Ptolemaic Egypt had long been allied with Rome. One of the Hellenistic powers that was always allied with Rome.
Okay.
And so they would often go to Rome, a Ptolemy would go to Rome and say, hey, my brother took the throne. You need to adjudicate me to be on the throne. And the Romans would be like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
You're the friend of the Roman people. Let's go and take care of it.
Wow.
It happened multiple times, even all the way up to Cleopatra's time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very complex. I'm not going to get into the details because it's not important for the story, but just know that in 30 BC, Caesar Augustus becomes more or less the undisputed master of the Roman Republic and takes control of Egypt as well.
Yeah.
He, a couple years later, would be given the moniker of Augustus.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the consequence of all of this, right? The Romans now, instead of fighting civil wars with each other, they're at peace, within the empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can now focus on external things.
Expansion,
exactly. Mm-hmm. And Augustus was 100% interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
So before we finally move on to the protagonist of this episode, I want to talk about the leaders of Kush, the Kandakes, or Kandakes, excuse me. We know very little about them, but we know that these rulers were all queens. So that's right. The Kush was more of a queendom at times as opposed to a kingdom.
That's so cool.
Not exclusively, but far more than, contemporaries in other areas.
And I'd never heard of that before. That's so interesting.
Yeah, exactly. When or why this happened, it's completely unclear.
Yeah.
To me, though, it's always interesting to see either a matriarchal or quasi-matriarchal society take form.
Yes.
Because it is abnormal, especially in the ancient world.
Absolutely.
It doesn't happen very often.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, who was Queen Amanirenas? Say that 3 times really fast.
Who was Queen Amanirenas? Who was Queen Amanirenas? Who was Queen Amanirenas?
Okay, that's really good. I'm actually kind of impressed. So
it's the cold medicine.
Yeah. So Queen Amanirenas. And I'm going to try to pronounce this in her native tongue.
Oh shit.
Amnirense quor lil quidili lil.
I think that was perfect.
Yeah, I butchered that. But
you made an effort.
I made an effort.
That's what matters.
She was born around 57 BC.
That's a little while ago.
A little while ago, and most likely in the capital city of Miro.
Okay.
We know nothing of her upbringing, so much is left to the imagination. Speaking of which, being raised in a tradition where there were so many powerful female leaders, that obviously came before you. I find it very hard to imagine that she would have at least somewhat idolized them growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
We know she was also very skilled and thoughtful ruler who's kind of like a jack of all trades sort of person.
Okay.
So she was particularly adept in administration, in trade, and in defense.
Wow, those are really good things to be good at.
Right, exactly. Especially in the ancient world, you want to be good at a lot of things. I guess that hasn't changed now.
Yes, you want a well-rounded ruler for sure.
Exactly. And more importantly, she was a very capable military leader and strategist, which in the ancient world, that's everything, right?
Yeah.
That is the most important quality.
Yeah, that's how your people will survive.
Exactly. And she would ascend to the ultimate power in her land with the death of her husband. And I'm going to butcher this, guys, but it's Teret Tekase. And that happened in around like 25 BC.
So she wasn't born into being queen. She married into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're
she was
not
probably noble.
Yes.
Of noble birth, but
she could have even been regal.
But we don't know
we
much.
Really know. No. Yeah.
Because I just wonder, obviously we don't have the answer for this, but that would affect how much or how little she was prepared for the throne.
Exactly.
Depending on like her birth status, I guess.
That's a really good point of view. Yeah. I didn't think about it like that. So we also know that she had 2 titles. So I already mentioned Kandake, but she was also a core, Qore.
Qore.
Because she was hardcore, bruh.
Oh my god.
I'm so sorry, guys. But in all seriousness, this does signify that she ruled in her own right.
Okay.
And
interesting.
as the title of core was usually reserved for like kings, even in the more ancient past.
Wow.
So she was viewed as like a legitimate ruler.
To the same level of a king.
Exactly. Not just like, oh, you're a queen.
Queen consort.
Thank you. Yeah. She was like a queen regnant, I guess.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so in essence, like she is a Kandake because she is a woman, but she also as a core has the legitimate authority. Makes sense, right?
Yes, this does make sense. This is a really out of left field question. It is totally okay if you don't know the answer to this.
Of course.
But just since you're the ancient history expert, I was wondering if you happen to know, is this also what happened more or less with Queen Nefertiti?
Oh, I don't know.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, her husband was pharaoh and then he dies. And then she's like, I'll just rule this instead. Everyone's like, yeah, we really like you. You keep doing it. That
sounds familiar, and I believe that's correct.
We could be making this up.
We could completely be making this up. So you can fact check us on this one, guys. But I think that sounds correct.
Yeah. Weirdos, Google it.
Google it.
Let us know.
Oh, and then also kind of lastly, going back to Amanirenas.
Yes.
She had only one eye.
What?
Yeah, she was a monophthalmos.
Oh my gosh, and we don't know if she was born that way.
No, she was not born that way.
Oh, okay.
She lost it in battle.
Oh, that's badass.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my goodness.
Again, you literally, I have in my notes, I'm like, that just adds to her badass style.
Absolutely.
You're 100% right.
Yes.
It's so cool.
That gives you legitimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, her medal, though, would absolutely be proven sooner rather than later.
Oh, yes. Tell us the chisme.
Let's get back to Octavian / the man who would become Augustus. He's absolutely crushing it at this period in time, right? It's 30 BC. He's gained control of Egypt, and he ends essentially the longest Egyptian dynasty in history.
That's true, the Ptolemaic dynasty.
And this ends pharaonic dynasties like forever.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. So the Roman legions are now in Egypt and are poised to launch expeditionary forces, though, in Arabia.
Okay.
3 years later, the Senate gives Octavian like the official cognomen of Augustus.
Which means
the venerated one. And it's basically an unprecedented level of power given to any one man in Rome, going all the way back to the kings of Rome.
Yeah.
Like in the 6th century BC. Which would have been very foreign to the Romans at this point in time. And he has pretty much like one goal in mind at this point in time. Because he's still young. He wants to expand Rome's domain. And he will do that. So let's look at this scenario from Kandake Amanirenas' perspective.
Okay.
So this foreign power takes down the ruling dynasty, within your neighbor.
Yeah, your neighbors who've been the same people ruling for forever,
and they've been on pretty good terms.
Yeah.
For most of that, for like 300 years, right?
Time.
They're situated at your doorstep, and It's like this for basically 4 years until 26 BC, when the prefect or governor of Egypt is tasked with that invasion of the Arabian Peninsula. So that invasion actually is kind of interesting in its own right because it just is sort of a disaster. But then also the Romans do have some minor successes, and it isn't really talked about very often. Augustus kind of like tries to sweep it under the rug. But we're History for Weirdos. We love that stuff.
Yes, exactly.
But like they basically make it all the way to southwestern Yemen.
Wow.
Where like the Houthis are now actually at.
Oh my goodness.
Ironically enough. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Amanirenas. So she has this opening now where essentially the majority of Roman legions are not in Egypt. So she does something a little audacious. She invades like southern Egypt the following year in 25 BC.
Oh my goodness. She's not even like, I'm just going to sit here and be content that I'm like the Kandake / the core. She also is like, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, and she does.
Wow.
Because like Rome at this point was already asking for tribute from...
Of course they were.
Yeah. And this was expected because a lot of other neighbors that didn't want to fight Rome were like, here, man, just take some money.
Just take it. Leave us alone.
Leave us alone.
It's like the mob.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of was. I mean, that's how a lot of empires operated that like in the ancient world, honestly. It was very mob-like. But Amanirenas, she was having none of that. She was like, no, thank you. I'm not into this. So with a force of around 30,000, they take the Egyptian Roman cities of Elephantine, Philae, and even Aswan.
Oh my goodness.
So, and it could be during this sort of conflict is when she loses her eye.
Oh, snap.
But we're not clear. Like the one source on this is a Greco-Roman dude by the name of Strabo. And
He's not clear.
He's not clear on anything.
Of course.
And he's a buddy with Augustus, so he's going to have a very, very
biased perspective.
Yes, pro-Augustus bias.
These Roman historians, by the way, because we've cited them quite a few times, they tell stories like my tios do, like at the end of the meal when it's late and they've been drinking some tequila, and I'm like, wait, what's happening here?
I know.
The timelines are not adding up.
They're like the old oracles or like those bards from like back in the day that would sing the tales.
Yes, that's them.
Yeah, those are your tios.
They're my
basically
tios.
Modern bards.
Yes, they're modern day bards. They have little like stand-up bits almost about it.
It's amazing. I've seen it in action.
Yes, and it is very biased. It is very biased.
Yeah, usually though, if they like you, it'll be a good bias.
You say that because they love you.
That's true. They do. And I like that. So the Kushites end up like enslaving hundreds, possibly thousands of Romans and Egyptians.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, during this time. And while they're pillaging, to add insult to injury, they either destroy statues of Augustus or take them back to Kush.
Uh-oh.
So kind of a little bit of an aside here. Statues were very important in the ancient world.
Yeah.
Especially for larger empires because, think about it, most of your population is illiterate. And these statues can be used as a political tool to let everyone know, I'm in charge. This is my face. I'm the master now.
Yeah, they hold great influence. You're right. That's such a great point to make, that most people are illiterate. So it's not like you're going to send out a newsletter across your empire, you know?
That's amazing. You got me to cough.
You want your face everywhere so people know like, oh, it's this guy. This is the big kahuna.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100% correct. And it was just important from like obviously a practical and a prestigious perspective, right?
Perspective, yeah.
Yes.
And I will say, you know way more about the man than I do, but what I do know about Augustus is he's got an ego.
He has a massive ego.
So he's not going to like this.
He's not. So in the most famous such case of these statues being destroyed or stolen, the Kushites cut off the head of one bronze statue and actually bring it back to the capital city of Miro. And it gets worse. They bury it in the sand and build a temple of victory over it. And in fact, the head of the statue would be situated underneath the entrance like right underneath the entrance of this temple.
Mm-hmm.
So you would essentially like walk over the head, like entering a temple of victory.
Walk over Augustus.
Over Augustus's decapitated head. Obviously, the statue.
The symbolic.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's some heavy symbolism.
Exactly.
I feel like that's pretty metal.
It is very metal. Like, no pun intended. Get it? Because bronze, metal.
Yeah. I got it. That's why we're married.
I know. I feel like I was BoJack Horseman there for a second, like over-explaining the joke. Do you get it? Here's 10 pages explaining. Sorry. Okay. ADHD in check, Andrew. Let's do this. Okay. Obviously, a gigantic slight to Augustus, right?
Yeah.
He's going to take this very personally.
I think it is personal.
Yeah, it is personal. Amanirenas, she's going to pay a big price. She's going to pay the price for this. So,
but she's so thug.
She is thug.
I don't want her to pay the price.
She's going to pay the price. So 24 BC rolls around, and Gaius Petronius, he's the new prefect of Roman Egypt. He leads an army with troops like that were mainly from the Arabian Peninsula expedition.
Mm-hmm.
They have like a modest yet formidable army at around 10,000 legionaries and as well as about 800 cavalry.
Okay.
So not nearly as many troops as the Kushites, but enough to cause serious issues for Amanirenas. And at first, this force marched against Aswan, and it met a force of 30,000 Kushites, right?
Yeah.
Despite being outnumbered 3-1, though, the disciplined, well-equipped Roman legionaries completely routed the Kushite forces. They just fled in a bunch of different directions. And if you think about it, like, look, the Roman legions had state-of-the-art equipment. They were arguably the best fighting force like on the planet at this time, whereas the Kushites were fighting with axes, pikes, and simple swords.
Much more informal.
Exactly.
This is like they were like pro athletes, the Romans, and this was like a community college team or something.
Yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate. And so we know that Amanirenas was in the city of Napata with her son, like further to the south. And Gaius Petronius knows this and starts his march, taking the cities of Selchus and Peremnus. Amanirenas actually sues for peace at this point and even offers to return all the statues and people that she took. So
I know you're really upset about the statues, but I'll throw in the people too.
Yeah. So like a delegation met with the Romans in the city of Dhaka, like to do this in 24 BC, but the Romans not only declined this offer, but in response, they razed the city of Selchus to the ground and continue to move further into Kush territory.
Oh my.
Yeah, big ouch. And we also think that it's during this time that Amanirenas' son, Akinadad, dies during the fighting.
Can I just say something?
You can say something, yes.
I always, even though it's very sad, I will always respect a leader that is willing to put their own body into battle as well as their children.
Right.
Because if you're going to ask other people to sacrifice their bodies and their children,
I know, that's why
you should do it too.
I totally believe if like a president, this is my own personal opinion, but if a U.S. president wants to declare war on someone,
you need skin in the game.
They need to put their kid or their grandkids in there.
Yeah.
I mean, the way presidents have been going, it's more likely to be grandkids.
That's so true.
Great kids would probably be too old.
Great grandkids.
Great grandkids even. Yeah. But like absolutely, like they need to be there. Right?
Like you can't ask that of the people that you are responsible for if you're not going to give a little yourself as well. So far Amanirenas seems pretty badass to me as a leader.
She is. Well, we don't know like a ton about her. All the sources is one, first of all, and it comes from a Roman.
Yeah.
Or someone with Roman sympathies at the very least.
Right.
So most likely angered by her son's death, Amanirenas orders an attack on the Roman garrison that was left behind at the conquered city of Peremnus.
Okay.
However, Gaius Petronius was an intelligent and capable commander, and he knew this was coming. So he got to the city before the Kushites, and there was this period of time where the two armies are kind of just standing opposite of each other, not sure what's going to go on. This time, however, no battle actually ensued.
Oh.
Yeah. So there was just a stalemate, and then peace talks were opened yet again. Augustus himself actually traveled all the way to Egypt to oversee this resolution.
Oh, shit.
Like, this is how important it was.
Yeah.
Like, in his probably broader scheme. And I'll talk about that in a second. Mm-hmm. But the fighting must have been really tough for both sides.
Yes.
As the treaty was signed relatively quickly. And famously, the envoys to Augustus gave him gold arrows, right? A gift, and they quoted, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but they said it was either a gift for a friend or weapons that he would need to fight like them as an enemy.
Oh.
So they're basically saying, like, these are some really cool golden arrows, but you're going to need all the help you can get if you want to continue fighting us.
Wow. So it's kind of like a peace gift, kind of like a threat.
Exactly. And that's why the source is very strange, because it just seems like the Romans are steamrolling the Kushites, but I don't think that's necessarily 100% accurate.
Because if that were the case, there would not be a peace treaty.
Right.
Augustus
and
wouldn't be there.
It gets even more interesting because it's very favorable to the Kushites. Like, I'll get that into a second, but I could just imagine that in Augustus's mind, like, an invasion of Kush would be very costly in terms of both money and in human resources, right?
Yeah.
And troops' lives. And if I were to put myself in his shoes, like, I don't think it's worth it. Like,
okay.
He's probably like, you know what? This is just they're annoying. Like, they've been beaten. Like, they know when to kind of just, like, if I gave them favorable terms, they'll just kind of like
he
go
thinks
away.
they'll meet those terms and
exactly.
it won't be a problem.
Like, he knew, like, could the Romans defeat the Kushites? Probably. Yeah.
But do you want to? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Exactly.
That's what he's asking himself.
And that's why he was brilliant. I have some criticism of Augustus, but he was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't get to where he was without being brilliant.
Right. He was just like 3 steps ahead of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So he also had to deal with, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, he had to also deal with the very powerful Parthian Empire. They're the Iranian based empire to the east.
Yeah.
In Mesopotamia and Iran. So
their statues have amazing beards.
Yeah, they do. Those are the Achaemenid Persians.
Yeah. Incredible
beards. And the Assyrians even earlier. So the peace treaty of 21 BC resulted in Rome withdrawing troops and remitting the tax claims from occupied Kushite territories. And in addition to that, Rome formally recognized Kush as like a legitimate kingdom.
Wow.
Very favorable terms to Kush.
Yes.
These are incredibly favorable. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, that's not usually how Rome dealt with rebellions.
No, they would just utterly crush. Like, utterly crush them. So Queen Amanirenas would rule for about another decade or so before finally passing away in around like 10 BC.
Okay. Probably natural causes.
Yeah, I think so. So remember that head that I spoke of earlier that was buried underneath the temple?
Yes.
Well, almost like 2,000 years later, after it was initially buried, it was rediscovered during an archaeological dig.
That is the coolest thing ever. I'm so jealous.
So 1910, while digging at the ruins of what was once known as the city of Miro, British archaeologist John Garstang found the head.
And sorry, weirdos, I say I'm jealous because Andrew and I both have fantasies about archaeology and going on archaeological digs. I would love that so much.
I know. And especially for me, like, I would love to do archaeological digs like in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of like, because for me, it's like the melting pot of a lot of different cultures I find fascinating, and you can find them all there, right? You can find the Romans, you can find the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians, the Persians, Seleucids, like other Hellenistic states. Like, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Anyways, enough nerding out.
Let's tell me about these guys that like lived my dream.
Yeah. So this head, right? It was buried in dry conditions. And so because of that, it was very well preserved for being like 2,000 years old.
That's so cool.
And we'll show a picture of it on our Instagram so you guys can actually check it out there. It's very quite striking as it's made of bronze, but the eyes are made of glass. and calcite, which gives a more lifelike quality.
That's creepy.
So not only is it like you can see it there, like most of those statues now, like the eyes are gone, like they've been removed.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like the marble or the bronze. But yeah, this case, the eyes are still there.
Oh my gosh.
It's quite neat.
So does it look like, I don't like this about ancient statues. It has like the googly eyes almost.
Sort of, but it's really well done. It's more lifelike.
Oh, okay.
It's better. I think it's better than the googly eyes.
Sometimes they're just so creepy looking.
They're so... It's like the one area where I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah. No, just get rid of that.
It's like, just get away with the color. Just make it... Do the white.
Yeah, do it all white.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
The marble looks pretty.
Yeah, it really does. And get this. You can even still see the statue's head in the British Museum today.
What?
Yeah, so if any of our listeners are in London, you can go to the British Museum and you just want to find the Miro head. That's just what it's called. M as in Mike, EROE, the Miro head.
Whoever is in London, please go. Take a picture, take a selfie, and send it to us.
Yes, we will absolutely post it.
Yes.
Live our dream, damn it.
Live our dreams.
So, we're so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I totally lost my place. Oh, that's right. So Amanirenas would not only defy Rome, right? But her peace treaty with the Romans would last for over 250 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and give prosperity.
That's badass.
Yeah. And
so she protected her people long beyond her reign.
Exactly. She would give prosperity to her people for generations.
That's a badass.
Yeah, and obviously the Miro head is just a symbol and physical actual evidence of Amanirenas' rebellious nature.
Yeah, we love a good rebel on here.
We do. We really do.
If you haven't noticed.
I mean, I'm a descendant of rebels, so we covered one on an episode.
That's true.
Anyways, so ironically though, a portion of Kush, in the 3rd century AD, would actually be absorbed into the Roman domain. But that's a different story for a different time. And obviously by that time, situation had changed very, very much so. But her heroism, in the midst of the most powerful empire in the world, is honestly just nothing less than astonishing.
Yeah, it's really I think you did a really good job of providing context at the beginning. I hope folks understand that for anyone to do this to Rome, to Caesar Augustus, let alone a woman, and get away with it,
right,
is insane.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
I will say geography probably helped a little bit just because it was
far away.
So far away from Rome's power center, which is Rome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they didn't take these slights lightly. They were very...
And Roman men really viewed women as less than.
Correct, yes.
Women were not seen as equals by any means. They were seen as property.
Yes. I will say, though, Augustus was not typical for most Roman men. He gave his wife Livia,
a lot of freedom.
A lot more leeway, than most.
She's smarter than him.
Yeah, she was very smart.
Yeah.
I think he used her to gain more power.
Yeah. Another very interesting figure.
Yes, we might cover her in the future as well.
We could do, we both do it, because we both love her so much.
That's true.
Yeah.
Or even the Augustus Livia power couple.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up here.
Yeah.
So she knew, Amanirenas, that is, she knew when to fight and when to take advantage of a situation, but she also knew when to throw in the towel and negotiate and be a diplomat.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? That's what made her so powerful. That's what made her so good. She didn't press too much, right? If she would have continued to fight, it might not have ended up so well for her.
And a lot of leaders do, just out of hubris.
Exactly. And she didn't have that, it seems.
Yeah.
So certainly the mark of not only a great leader, but a true weirdo.
A true weirdo. Only a weirdo would pull a stunt like that.
That's so true. So, weirdos, this was the life and legacy of Queen Kandake Amanirenas.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
She seems so cool. I can't wait to see the picture of the bronze statue. I just love this. Okay, between the three,
let's go.
Zenobia, Boudica, and Amanirenas. Who's your favorite?
Zenobia.
Oh, that was really quick. Why Zenobia?
She was like an empress, basically, of like the entire Eastern Mediterranean. And she did it pretty quickly. And she was only defeated because she went up against one of the most, if not the most underrated military genius of the ancient world, which is Aurelian, who also happens to be my personal favorite Roman emperor.
So your favorites colliding.
It's like, yeah, two of my favorite people colliding. I'm like, guys, no, don't fight. Like,
Mom and Dad.
Yeah,
I
know.
When you fight.
It really does feel like that.
That's awesome.
But Amanirenas is a close second or third. I honestly don't know. I love them all.
I know.
Zenobia probably just edges out. I'd say Amanirenas is 2, and sorry guys, Boudica's a number 3.
No, that's okay. We won't be offended.
Yeah, but
and we won't tell them.
Right, and Boudica's also like awesome. So
yeah, they're all really badass. This was such a cool, great story that I literally knew nothing about. I knew pretty much nothing about the Kushites.
I mean, most people don't.
So
I mean,
that's incredible.
They're always overshadowed by Egypt. So
yeah, I could see that. And I didn't know anything about Amanirenas. I'd never heard of her before.
I know. She's really fascinating. I really wish we knew more. I didn't put this in my notes, but there was like a stele found just shortly, a couple years after the bronze head was found. And
What's a stele?
Is just like it almost looks like a tombstone, or it's like a slab that has stuff written on it.
Okay.
And it's in her language, the Miro, like the Merovinese. I'm not even sure exactly what the language is, but it hasn't been fully deciphered. Ooh. So once that is fully deciphered, like we might be able to know a little bit more about her, like her exploits from her perspective,
right.
Not Strabo's.
Oh, that's so cool. We should set up a Google alert for that.
I know, right?
That's so cool. I also think some of the biggest badasses in the world are the people translating that stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm like, how?
So I don't know his name, but the guy who partially decoded or first translated Linear B, which is the Mycenaean Greek language, was a complete amateur.
That's crazy.
He was not a linguist.
I think it's just a skill of pattern recognition, right?
It has to be. So people with ADHD are going to be primed for this.
They must be ADHDers. That's who's doing it.
That's right. Let's go.
Let's go, ADHDers.
It is really hard having ADHD, but it's more hard, I think, being married to someone where like both of you have ADHD and you just like both of you are like, ah!
Babe, this isn't the time to air your grievances about the way our brains work.
I don't know. And that's also probably something about ADHD. Just like,
this is not the right time to share this. Let me share it right now. Yeah. It came across my mind, so I'm going to say it. Absolutely. I think maybe, hopefully, our candidness, our appreciation for pattern recognition, and our love of weirdos, which I think are all ADHD-like traits, is what makes the Weirdos Like the podcast.
I hope so, guys.
Tell us.
So.
How do you feel?
How do you feel about it? Let us know in the comments on Spotify.
Yes. Please let us know.
Or also just let us know how you like the episode. Do you guys like these sort of ancient figures? I mean, I hope so. That's on my bread and butter, so I really hope so. But I know if you like, I mean, Stephanie's more of like the more modern or like Renaissance, Enlightenment era.
I am more modern history for sure.
Yeah. You're a modern girly. I'm an ancient man.
Yes, but I love hearing you discuss ancient history.
Right, and I love hearing you discuss the more modern stuff.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for this episode. I learned a lot. I know the weirdos learned a lot, and you made me forget that I was sick for a little while. That was really nice. Thank you. You're the best. We appreciate you.
I'm just smiling. I'm just like, yep.
Just cheesing.
Just cheesing.
And weirdos, thank you so much for listening and for being here with us. Do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe or follow this podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can always keep up to date with us on Instagram at History for Weirdos. Or you can also keep up to date with us and get behind the scenes stuff on our Patreon.
Which, by the time you're listening to this, there are some new behind the scenes already uploaded to the Patreon.
Yes, exactly. So thank you so much, weirdos. Until next time.
Until next time, weirdos. Adios.